Have you ever met someone who didn't feel like the main character in your story, but somehow always felt like the reason things kept going wrong? Not in an obvious way, but in a subtle pattern that you only notice when you look back. Today, we're talking about something interesting. What if some of the most recognizable villains from Disney aren't just fiction, but exaggerated reflections of real human behavior that we see every day? And once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Jacob's Guest Lounge, stories behind the magic of Disney. You're all my guests today, so I want you all to pull up a chair and dive into this amazing topic as we discuss about Disney villains plus real people. Think about some well-known Disney villains. Ursula doesn't force people. She offers deals that feel right in the moment, but always have a hidden cost. Scar doesn't rush. He waits, observes, and uses timing and trust as tools for control. Prince John reacts to ego and pride, turning a single insult into something much bigger than it needed to be. And the evil queen. She's vain and selfish, but underneath it all, reactive, frustrated, and constantly feeling overlooked. When you strip away the fantasy, these aren't just characters anymore. They're behavior patterns. And my question for everybody is this. If villain traits in Disney stories are really just exaggerated versions of human behavior, which traits show up most often in real life? For example, when all of us look at Gaston, we're not just seeing confidence. We're seeing dependence on validation. He thrives on being admired, on being seen as the strongest, the most desirable, and the most certain. And when that attention disappears, so does his sense of control. It's not confidence that stands alone. It's confidence that needs an audience. Then you have Lady Tremaine, who represents something very different. She doesn't rely on attention. She relies on structure. She creates situations where she appears reasonable on the surface, but the outcome is already designed underneath. Even kindness becomes conditional. An opportunity is offered in theory, but removed in practice. And then there's Judge Claude Frollo, where the danger isn't about ego or manipulation, it's moral certainty. He believes he is righteous, and because he believes that completely, he never has to question whether he's wrong. His worldview protects him from accountability, even when his actions contradict the very values he claims to serve. And finally, there's Mother Gothel, who represents emotional dependency disguised as care. She doesn't control through force, she controls through fear and attachment. She convinces Rapunzel that the world is dangerous, while positioning herself as the only source of safety. And over time, care becomes control. One reason Disney villains stick with us is because they isolate emotional patterns that we recognize in real life. They take complex human behavior and simplify it just enough for us to see it clearly. And that clarity is something real life doesn't always give us. In real situations, behavior is layered. There are excuses, emotions, context, and self-justification all happening at once. But in stories, these patterns are separated. They become visible, and that's why Gaston feels so recognizable. That kind of validation-seeking confidence exists in real life, but it's rarely as cleanly defined. And that's why Lady Tremaine stands out, because control in real life is often subtle, not theatrical. She represents the quieter version of manipulation, where rules exist but only in appearance. Judge Claude Frollo represents something else entirely. The kind of person who never sees themselves as the problem because their beliefs protect them from ever needing to reconsider their actions. And Mother Gothel, She shows how care, when mixed with fear and dependency, can slowly become a form of control and a touch of manipulation as well. All not through force, but through emotional positioning. Now imagine this. You're watching your life like a movie. And instead of labeling people as good or bad, you only describe behavior. Not that they're difficult, but they respond to uncertainty through control. How does that change the way the story feels for you? The next question for everybody is this. Do you all think that most conflict between people comes from intention or from misunderstood patterns colliding? Think of someone you've disagreed with before. Now remove judgment completely. What remains is motivation. What were they trying to protect, avoid, or gain? Maybe the point isn't that villains exist in real life. And maybe it isn't even that people are villains or the heroes at all. Perhaps the point is that traits exist in all of us. And stories from Disney don't just create those traits, they simply isolate them. They take something complex about human behavior and let us see it without the noise. In the real world, those same traits are harder to notice because they're mixed with context, intentions, and everyday life happening around them. But in stories, they're clearer, more defined, and easier to understand from a distance. That's part of why they stay with us. Not because they're unrealistic, but because they feel familiar enough to recognize and distant enough to reflect on. So maybe the real difference between stories and reality isn't what exists inside them, but how clearly we're able to see it. The real world is quieter, but not that different. Before you all go, I want to bring it back to something we touched on earlier. If you had to choose one trait that shows up most in real life, what would it be? Manipulation like Ursula, jealousy and resentment like Scar, ego and pride like Prince John, or control and power like the evil queen? There will be a poll attached to this episode, so go ahead and vote now based on everything you've heard. And if you're listening somewhere without a poll, just take a moment and decide for yourself. And don't be afraid to comment after listening to the episode. Your answers are greatly appreciated because chances are your answer might not be the same as when we started. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you follow so you don't miss what's coming next. And even though we're still early in the journey, if this episode meant something to you, feel free to pass it along to someone else who might enjoy it too. Next Tuesday, we're celebrating America's 250th birthday in a way only a Disney podcast can. We'll explore how the stories Disney tells can help us think about a much bigger story, America itself. A story of dreams, change, possibility, and the future still ahead. Until next time, keep the magic alive, and I'll see you all back here in the lounge.